Hello and welcome everybody to today's roundtable. We have an amazing guest that I'm going to introduce, and I'll really allow him to introduce himself as folks filter in here. My name is Matt. I'm from Databook, from the marketing team, and we love to host these events. You know, one of the big things at Databook that we always want to encourage is helping sellers get better, whether it's through products, but also through the learnings, the day-to-day, and really talking to experts. So that's enough for me in this moment. I'm going to hand it over to Scott Ingram, who's just going to tell you a bit about himself, and we'll go right into some questions and kick things off. Hey, Scott.
Hey, Matt. Thanks for having me. Really been looking forward to this conversation. So this will be good. So by way of background, I am a quota carrying individual contributor. So I work with a marketing technology agency, if you will. Been in this space for a long time. Carry a $3 million annual number myself. And starting about 8 years ago, I started Sales Success Media. So that began with the Sales Success Stories podcast, where I only interview top 1% individual contributors. All of that came from, I've always been a student of sales. I read lots of books. I consume a lot of this information. And what always made me crazy is so much of that content came from people who haven't carried a quota in, years, decades. And I just wanted to figure out what are the best of the best doing right now, right? The people that are dealing with the same environment we are, the same level of distraction, the same level of the emergence of AI, who are competing in this space. What are they doing to win? So I'm now, 183 interviews into that show. That bred the Sales Success Summit. So every October, we come together. I do a 2-day event here in Austin. And the only people I put on stage at that event are the people who've been on the podcast. So for salespeople, by salespeople, absolutely incredible experience. But I realized a few years into this journey that the two best things about Sales Success Stories are the two worst things about it. So one, my favorite compliment is I'm the Tim Ferriss of sales. But that means that my episodes are really long. It is not uncommon for my interviews to go an hour and a half or more. So that can be a little bit intimidating. And obviously, my criteria is absolutely ridiculous and precludes me from talking to a lot of people. So I created the opposite show 1,800 and something episodes ago called Daily Sales Tips. So we do a sales tip every single day, 5 days a week, and I try and keep those 5 minutes or less. So it's literally the opposite, lots of voices, lots of insights, but real bite-sized kinds of ideas.
Well, Scott, I know that when I first joined Databook, one of the first things that I started to immerse myself in was podcasts. And of course, people who are on LinkedIn primarily who share really great tips. And I will just give a quick plug to you because you were one of the first that I came across. I learned so much so quickly. And for those of you who haven't checked out Scott's website, he breaks down each episode basically by the timestamp, and you follow a very consistent flow. So you're often getting, placing a lot of these top 1% sellers right beside each other. So you can really look at how did this, individual answer this question. And I can't thank you enough for joining today to answer a bunch of sellers' questions that we've already collected. And of course, at any point, please use the comment section. There's a little ticker down here to remind you. Post any new questions because we've got a slew to go through. Scott, you're going to give so much wisdom on this call. I'm really excited to have you, and I'm really grateful. What do you say we get right into it with the first question?
Let's do it. This is going to be fun.
Okay, so I'm going to read this one. What are the essential skills and traits of most A-player sellers? And what would you say are the inherited and learned abilities you see in these top performers?
Yeah. So why don't we start really importantly by defining what do we mean by a player? And one of the things I realize and have recognized for a long time is my crazy criteria, my number one top 1% thing is maybe disconnected from what real A players are, because obviously attainment is huge, right? If you're number one or in the top, single digit percentages on the leaderboard, that's really, really impactful, but it's not everything. And, one of the things I look for in the folks that I bring on to the podcast is I look for consistency, because one of the ways I'm able to kind of single out the A player piece in that is it's really hard to be an A player on the top of or it's really hard to be on the top of the leaderboard and really be an A player over time, right? You can really only do that if you're doing the right things over years, right? So I really look for that consistent performance. So attainment, certainly, but I think there's a lot of other intangibles that don't show up on the leaderboard. One of the things I think about is, are you bringing in the right kinds of deals? Right? Are you bringing in deals that are good for the business? Are they customers that aren't going to churn? Are they customers that are going to be happy and satisfied? They're going to buy more in the future. You're going to have upsell, cross-sell opportunities. Would they be willing to be a reference for you? Would they do business with you again in the future if they move to another company? Right? Those to me are a huge part of what I see, because I've seen the opposite. Because I have a little chip on my shoulder. I was in a previous role. I was not number one. I was number two. But the guy who was number one, his deals churned. He created all sorts of issues inside of the organization. I'm like, okay, who's the A player here, right? If you look at just the numbers, you maybe don't see it right. So I think it's really important to think beyond the numbers. And again, are you a team player? Does the rest of your organization that supports you in your deals, do they enjoy working with you? Or is it like, oh my God, here comes Scott, Actually, you know what? I wasn't planning on doing this. Let me see if I can do this real time. The best articulation I ever saw, in fact, the best leader I have ever worked with, was Alex Shootman. Alex Shootman, when I joined Eloqua years ago, was our chief revenue officer. He became the president. He's been the CEO of Workfront, who got acquired by Adobe. He's currently the CEO of Alchemy. The first time I sat down with him, he wasn't my boss. He was my boss's boss when I was interviewing with Eloqua, but we were both in Austin. So I went and visited with him, and he pulls out a sheet of paper and he says, Scott, our model is really, really simple here. He says there's two dynamics. I'm going to draw this. I'm going to hold it up. It's going to be really kludgy and funny, but we'll see if it works. So he draws this grid, and on the left axis, he writes getting it done. And on the bottom axis, he writes doing it right. So getting it done and doing it right. So here's the start of our box, right? So the first thing he does is he says, look, Scott, obviously what we want people who are going to get it done and do it in the right way. That's that upper right quadrant. Those are stars. That's what we want you to be. We want to recognize that. We want to reward that. We want you to make great money and have a great experience here. The opposite of that would be you're not getting it done. You're not doing it right. This is sales, folks. He put an F in that box because you're probably fired. So from there, though, here's the brilliance. So that's really all I need to say, I think, from an A player perspective. But let me show the rest of this because it's mind blowing. The other thing he shared was, if you're not getting it done, you're not achieving the numbers that we would expect, but you're doing it right. You're doing all of the right things. You're exhibiting all of the right behaviors. He wrote a C in that box, and he said, we want to coach you. We believe that good things happen to good people. We want to help you get to that attainment you're looking for and move you up to that top box where you are a star. But here's the piece that blew my mind, and I knew that this was an absolutely incredible sales culture. He said, if you're one of those people who's getting it done, but you're not doing it right, you're a bull in the china shop, you're bringing in bad deals, you are toxic, and we will fire you faster. So how many organizations have we been in where we've seen that, like that wrong, not A player person who's at the top of the leaderboard, who's just, tears the team apart, brings in bad business, and yet we're rewarding them. So this culture was absolutely amazing. So anyway, that's how I think of, again, the simplest breakdown is getting it done and doing it right. I think is the easy way to think of this A player thing. So from there to the rest of your question, which is, what are those skills? What are those abilities? I mean, it is those things, right? It's doing all of the core sales things. It's having discipline. It's being consistent in your approach, but it's being, honestly, I think it's a lot. It's being yourself. What the one thing I have learned in doing over 180 of these interviews is that the best of the best, they have found their own way. Right? They have sort of figured out these are my superpowers, and they lean really into that, and they become the best version of themselves. And that's what helps them achieve at extraordinary levels consistently over time. Right? So that part is intrinsic. That is something that you bring to the table. The trick is figuring out what is that for you? What are those things that make you great? And how do you leverage them in your sales process so that you get to be that best version of you?
Yeah, I love what you said there too, because again, going back to a lot of the wisdom that you've passed down, there's short-term wins and then there's the long-term win. And I think you also identity and authenticity. Those are key things that you have to bring and stick with you. It's what makes you unique. It's probably really on your boss. We can talk more about bosses, of course, and teams later on in the session. But it's also those people's jobs to bring that out and help you, really shine with what makes you unique and really harness that collaboration aspect. Let's just jump into this next one. I think this is going to be a really great companion piece. Let's say you achieve A player status, right, Scott? Then what? How do you continue to evolve and grow from there? What's next?
Yeah. So the first thing is, like we just defined, A player status is about consistent performance over time. So winning the sales lottery and having it look like you're this A player, but it only lasting for a quarter, or it was only that one fiscal year, that's not the game, right? The game is, how do I keep this going over a long period of time, over multiple years, to really grow my career and my impact, right? So the first, and here's what happens when you get to, and a little bit of a distinction, obviously you can be an A player without being number one or in the top 1%, but that's obviously where a lot of my focus is. What happens as you get to those upper echelons is you become your own competition, right? You're not competing with anybody else anymore. Right now, you are the competition. So it's continuing to figure out, how do I find another gear? How do I find that next level? I think one of the key ways that I do this is I surround myself with the best people I find, right? Maybe those people aren't in my organization. I've been number one in my day job organization for 4 or 5 years. So I can't find that in my organization. Of course, there's little things that I can learn along the way. Don't get me wrong. But I get most of my learning outside because, obviously the podcast helps me do this a lot, right? But going to the summit, joining our Sales Success Society, and just being in a place where there's other people who are wired this way in sales, because I think there is a disconnect. There's a large percentage of sales professionals who, like, look, this is my job. I make good money. But is it really a profession? Is it really your craft? Is this really something you want to be great at, and you're willing to put in that energy to continue to learn and continue to grow? Those are the people that I want to surround myself with, because that's what I'm trying to do.
Yeah, and I think it also opens the door, I imagine, in your line of work too. You mentioned the summit, and for those who haven't seen on LinkedIn, you shared a great recap and just the people's enthusiasm. So it's really that mentorship, right? Passing down to the next generation while you're still learning and growing as well. Because if you hit this amazing, mountain, the only way down is down, right? The only way the next step. So it's like, how do you continue to be like that? You got to continue to evolve. And I know that obviously with technology, sales tools, you got to stay up to speed with everything that's going on with AI. So I know that's another thing we're going to touch upon. So thank you for sharing on the A player continuation. The next one is, we talked a lot leading into this. Folks really want to know about productivity. So what's your advice on setting and reaching productivity goals that really matter? And I'd probably just add that are achievable, right? You don't want to set unrealistic expectations.
Yeah, I love talking about this. Productivity is one of my superpowers, right? So one of the most common questions I get is, Scott, how do you do all this, right? How is it that you are number one on your team, managing a multi-million-dollar quota and all of your clients from that perspective? You're running 2 podcasts, you're running this event, you've got a family. I've got 2 girls and an amazing wife. And so this is so core to me. When I think about this piece of it, I know we'll talk about this a little bit more, but as we think about productivity goals, I think the key is controlling your controllables. So this is something that we talk about a lot. It was a huge theme in the summit this year of there are so many things in sales that we have no control over. There's things inside of our organizations we can't control. There are many things inside the organizations of the companies that we're selling to that we can't control. There are macroeconomic conditions and elections and whatever else that we have no control over. So for your own mental health, you should focus on the things that you can directly impact. And the way I think about this is it's all about the inputs, right? So I can't even necessarily control, if you really think about it, you can't control your ultimate sales outcome and how you perform at the end of the year, right? There's going to be some elements of luck that come into that because of all of those variables that we talked about. What you can control is the inputs, right? How much time are you spending prospecting? How many new opportunities are you creating? The biggest input I think about these days is the number of quality conversations I'm having each day, each week. That when I really boil everything down, it all comes down to that. And it's not just, these aren't only client conversations, new, discovery calls. These are also conversations that I'm having internally. These are conversations that I'm having with my leader, with my boss, with my peers, with other people in the organization. I work for a professional services organization. My people are my product. So those relationships are super important because in order for me to deliver on what I sell my customers, I need those individuals to deliver on what I committed them to so that I can then do the next deal.
I love that you mentioned the quality because I think it goes back to the axis that you're showing as well. There's a right and a wrong way to do it. You could say, hey, I booked all these people, but who are they? Are they quality? Are they going to help you grow, evolve? Are they going to move the deals forward and the revenue? Or are they just numbers, frankly? And really good points there. I do want to, we're on this time management tip, and I know we have some stuff teed up that's right in that realm, but I would like to just quickly go to the audience here because we had Mike. So Mike wrote, how do you break through the barrier of clients wanting you to balance current service delivery versus bringing in new solutions, turning near-term expectations into results? Those don't always line up.
So my philosophy on this is really, really simple. And again, it's one of the things that I think I have seen very, very consistently in the top performers. The people who are in this number one spot, the reason they got there is because what they're really number one at is taking care of their customers, right? It's really a servant leadership type of approach, right? We're here to serve the companies that we sell to and the people that we sell to. And the leaderboard and the W-2 and the big paychecks and the commissions are a side effect of that. So what I always default to is what is best for the customer. It doesn't really matter what our product offerings are and all. Of course, I want to sell them more stuff. But if it's not aligned with them and it's not aligned with their needs, I'm not willing to sacrifice that relationship and future opportunities for a short-term opportunity now. And so what you have to do to be able to be in this position, we could do a whole rabbit hole about quota and all kinds of things here, but I believe that when you have a strong enough pipeline, and you're ahead of your numbers. That's really the key. If you can get ahead of your numbers, I bet we all are like this. When you're above plan, you're probably a different salesperson. You're probably a better salesperson. When you're below plan, the urge is to do unnatural things that are not what a great salesperson would do. So the challenge is, ideally, you just get ahead of the sticks all the time and you're always able to be that person. But I also think the challenge is, even if you're behind, you still have to do those right things because it works. So it's all about what does your customer need? We're just here to serve them. And if something's not the right fit, I will tell them and say, you know what, that's not us. I actually have a competitor that does a better job of that, and you might want to use them for this project.
Yeah, and it sounds like it goes back to what you started off with, right? Which is the traits of an A player are long-term, consistency, authenticity, probably a serious degree of transparency too, as you just said,
Yes.
being honest.
Yes.
That, let's say you shift companies, you might find your way back to that potential customer prospect again. How do you want to have been perceived the last time? What have you done for me lately? Hey, if you screwed me the last time, I don't think I'm going to buy from you. And burning bridges and networks. Now everybody knows who knows everybody. It's a whole, I know you could do a deep rabbit hole dive into that of ping, ping, ping. This person will hear from this person because of your mutual connections. It's that simple these days, right?
Yeah. It all comes down to trust. And I believe in sales karma, right? When you do a lot of these right things, bluebirds fly in the window and good things happen, because I live in fear of karma is a double-edged sword, right? If you do the right things, good thing happen. If you do the wrong things, I kind of feel like, look, if I jam a deal, right? If I force somebody into a thing that I know isn't going to be the right fit, then we're not going to deliver on what I promised. And I know the executive that owned sort of that result, they weren't able to get it because of us. They're going to show up in some other deal in my future life. Like, oh, I'm late stage in this deal. It's the deal of a lifetime. And they're going to say, hey, we just brought on this new executive leader. Guess who it is? Oh, I am never going to get this deal. Yeah. So I just, to me, it's if you always do the right thing, you never have to worry about that.
What goes around comes around, right?
That's it.
So going back to this next question, which brings us back to this time management productivity, can you please give some tips around time management entering a new week, right? There's a whole new week, but how about a new quarter? So what's the mindset? How can you set those achievable goals?
Yeah. So again, I've got super deep dive stuff on this. And in fact, if you want to really get into my own productivity process, if you go to top1.fm/BQ4P. This is a presentation I did with Sales Hacker years ago. It's beyond quota. 4P is the process that I described. In a nutshell, my process on any of these time periods, it actually comes down to daily. So daily, weekly, monthly, quarterly, I have essentially a triage process. So I'm really taking this big view of, okay, what are all of the things that I need to get done and what are my biggest priorities? And going through, and there's a whole inbox zero part of this. There's a lot of different dynamics, again, on a daily basis that I'm kind of going through and understanding what are the things that are both coming at me that I need to deal with urgently, and what are my highest level priorities? What are the big picture things that I need to be working on that maybe aren't urgent, but they're going to allow me to get to the next level and get to that next really big deal? If you have a process, I won't get into all the details here, but it really comes down to having a process that you can trust and that you can execute consistently to get to that place. And part of what got me there, one of the biggest ingredients in this, I didn't read, I'll come back to that, is David Allen's Getting Things Done. I actually think the book sucks. The way that I came to this initially, I listened to him deliver, this is old, I think I had a set of CDs. He delivered a 2-day seminar and recorded the whole thing on how it works. That was awesome. I think, I didn't check this link. I think that's still available. If you go to top1.fm/GTD, it'll link you straight there to that thing. That for me, absolutely foundational, fundamental. And I built my entire strategy around that. And again, if you want to get into the details of my strategy, way more for you. I don't want to take the whole hour here, Matt, with all the productivity tips and tricks and how this whole thing works. But again, triage, prioritize, and then execute on that plan.
Yeah, I also like what you said too about just rinse and repeat, especially if sellers are switching jobs. Of course, there's always the internal stuff. There's internal meetings. There's certain priorities you have to have. And our next question is actually going to be, arguably the biggest priority, which is work-life balance. So I'll just put this question up. But how do you prioritize your time when it comes to managing high stakes accounts, these big deals, these gotta have them, they progress fast or slow, but then also work-life balance. How do you take a vacation? How do you go to the soccer practice? How do you take a weekend off, like when you've earned it?
Yeah, absolutely. And this is core to me. I think I share this in that productivity presentation. My priority list, everybody says, oh, my family is the most important thing. My family is not my most important thing. My health is. Because if I don't have my health, I'm no good to my family. I'm no good to my company. I'm no good to anybody else. So it's health, family, business, and all of these things. When I do this prioritization process, I really don't pay too much attention to what's what, right? It's really just an understanding of what are those things that matter, and you prioritize accordingly. One of the things, again, this was a big summit topic this year, is the idea of, and I was inspired by this years and years ago. There was a Harvard Business Review article that I saw on managing energy, not time. And there's so many things about that are counterintuitive, because you would naturally sort of think, oh, well, I have this much energy for my day. Why would I want to do what Scott did and get on a Peloton for 45 minutes this morning and not hurt myself, but like exert myself a lot, and use up part of that energy? But the reality is, when you do those kinds of things, when you work out, I'm not good at this, but if you can take naps, you get more energy. And so there's ways that you can invest your time. And again, just understanding your natural rhythms, right? Understanding when there's a word for this, but your cycles essentially are going to put you in a place where you're in a time where you can perform at peak levels, versus, oh, I'm in that like afternoon dip trough and maybe I just need to do some admin work for a minute, right? So it's understanding, when did those occur, and how can I put my highest value, my highest, intelligence needing activities into those windows, right? So it's all of those things. But again, I think, in order to find balance, or maybe balance isn't the right word, we talk a lot about kind of work-life integration. In order to do that, you first have to be clear on those priorities. And so if you are sacrificing your health, or if you are sacrificing your family, that catches up with you too. So just like the managing your energy, I think it's also managing your life. If you're doing a good job of that, it's going to make managing your professional life, your sales role, easier.
Well, it's something that triggered or sparked it came back to something you said earlier, which was, in sales, it's a revenue goal. It's pretty tangible. It's binary. It's, you either have it or you don't. And you want to get, I think you said, ahead of the sticks.
Yep.
With our personal lives, there's really not a metric for that. Sometimes there's no Fitbit that says, hey, man, you're pretty happy today. Way to go. What are you doing? You have to kind of know that. And I think what you're alluding to, whether it's the Peloton or a vacation or a morning walk that's more relaxed, or something for you to keep you in your number one priority, which is healthy. We're not seeing that battery level. We feel it. And
Yep.
You don't want to get behind the sticks on that, because I think what you're alluding to is that informs the whole thing. It's like a domino effect. And each person's unique. There's no like chart that says do these things, but you know in your heart of hearts what those are. And I think your calendar should reflect that too, right? I think that's what you're saying.
Yeah. And again, especially family and relationships, right? Like, I try and be there as much as I can for my kids' activities. Here's another one. If you're married, if you have a spouse, take care of that relationship, because I've seen plenty of people go through divorces. You don't go through a divorce and perform at uber high levels. Like that's not a thing, right? So really taking that long-term view, and when your relationship's in a good place and when your relationship's not in a good place, and when you need to lean in, right? So a lot of the time, that's really just putting in the time and energy, and again, making sure it's top of mind and something you're thinking about.
Yeah. So you mentioned that relationship between a spouse, a significant other. Our next question is kind of, around one of those other really important relationships in our life, our leadership, right? So
Yeah.
Scott, can you cover some pointers around the best ways of collaborating internally with leadership on alignment? Because I'm just going to say this, not everybody's always aligned when they join a new job or even as the quarters progress. So how do you handle this? How do you recommend the teams handle this too?
Yeah, and this becomes more and more and more important the larger and more complex the deals you're doing are. So when I interview the enterprise sellers on Sales Success Stories, and you can get there. We've got a list of kind of the more enterprise oriented episodes, top1.fm/enterprise. The question that I often ask them is, what percentage of your time is spent working with customers and working on deals from that perspective versus working internally to get your organization aligned around those deals? Again, when we start to get into very large deals, that becomes over 50%. So the internal becomes even more important. The leadership piece is very important. I'll come back to it, but it's not the only piece. Part of the way I think about our role in sales is to wield our organizations on behalf of our clients. And so in order to do that, you have to understand all of the different pieces and how to get things done. And so actually, I just did a sales tip on this pretty recently where I talked about, it was really advice for somebody that's starting in a brand new role, but this applies, this advice is universal. And I said, you need to be a one-on-one meeting machine. You need to connect with people across the organization so that you have relationships with, I mean, again, think about all the different areas that touch your deals. You've got solutions engineers who might be doing demos for you. You've got client success that you're going to hand off to, or account management. You've got legal that's going to be helping you negotiate terms on your deals. You might need help with finance. All these pieces. And they're all really important because at the end of the day, getting these things done, usually you just need to ask somebody, right? Like sometimes there's this really defined process, but most of the time somebody has to do something. And if you have that relationship and can just ask for it, you're able to move that much faster. So obviously, one of the very key constituents in that whole stack of relationships is your executive leadership. What I would say there, again, start with a one-on-one conversation, right? Have the conversation about, hey, I want to be really great at this. I want us to have a really strong working relationship so that we can put together really amazing deals together. That'll get them excited. And from there, you just need to ask a lot of questions. Like, treat this as a discovery and understand, how do they like to work, right? When you bring them into an opportunity, what sort of a briefing document or prep call do they want to have going into that so that they're comfortable and they understand what their role needs to be in that particular interaction, right? Understanding their communication preferences, right? Maybe like, I just want it all in Slack. I want an email. I actually want to have a quick conversation. I want to talk 10 minutes before we do it, or I want to bring that entire deal team together and have a 30-minute prep call so we're all on the same page and I'm very clear about my role and can also help coach the rest of the team on how we're doing this. Every executive is a little bit different in the way that they like to do this. The other thing I will say is every executive has different superpowers. So as you're thinking about assembling this team, right, you're like building the Avengers to help you go win this deal. What is each person really good at, right? Right? Like, you need something smashed. Awesome. I got Hulk for that. It's really understanding all of those different nuances and pieces so that you can bring that collective team together. A lot of that is going to come just through experience, right? You're not going to know. You can ask them. You can say, hey, tell me about where you had the most impact on a deal. How are you able to do that? How can I best use you? Also ask, what makes you uncomfortable? Is there something that some people ask you to do that you're like, please don't make me do that, right? Just understanding all of those things, having that really good working relationship is going to allow you to bring just a really great team to bear. And that will absolutely increase your win rates. If you can get that kind of alignment and executive down, you're going to win at way higher rates.
Yeah, and I think what you're alluding to too, I'm so glad you touched on the collaboration, because as sellers will know, security nowadays with AI. There's so many things that can make or break along the way. And you want to build those relationships. You want to make the process turnkey so that you're not waiting in a queue because you're reinventing the wheel, right? You got to have documented processes that can be replicated, rinsed and repeated. And then also, it sounds like, going back to your initial answer at the beginning of this, how are you going to paint yourself as an A player? How are you going to strive to that? And how are you setting that bar for your teammates? Because eventually, as you're saying, these enterprise deals, especially, there's such a long cycle. They stop and start, and sometimes identities of people change, right? There's turnover along the way, and everything spot on as it emerges and moves forward, so that it's going to make its way through to the best of what you can control.
And Matt, one last point on this.
Yeah.
Celebrate the wins and celebrate everybody that contributed. So I picked this up from, I was at Bazaar Voice years ago as they went public, so pre-IPO, kind of through that process. They had this thing that they did called How the Deal Was Done, HTDWD. I've got a sales tip on this somewhere. So if you just search for that, if you search for HTDWD, How the Deal Was Done, you'll kind of find the structure of this. But it's really about, it's telling the story of the deal, right? Like, we were able to win this giant logo. We won it because of this. And here's all the people, individual shout outs of the way that they contributed to the deal and the things that they did. And again, just thanking them, because there's too often they just don't get that recognition that they deserve. Like, sales is a team sport. If you think this is a lone wolf thing, you're not going to go very far. Yeah. Certainly not in enterprise sales, because it takes a village and sometimes 3 villages.
Well, I think, a lot of what I've learned and what you're conveying from your wisdom here is, it just goes back to, very core beliefs and things that we were taught at a young age. Treat others how you want to be treated. It goes for customers. It goes for internal. Like, take out the competition at times and make it a team sport, right? Because if you're just being, lone wolf going rogue, it can be a very lonely place, especially if something crumbles. There's nobody there to lift you up. There's nobody there to try to get it back on track. You're sort of surrounded by nobody. And you want to be an A player amongst A players, right? We got this question from Rob, so I'm just going to tee this one up. Out of all your podcast interviews, have you published a summary of key skills or attributes, or summary of key processes or activities, kind of like what Neil Rackham did with Spin years ago?
So great question, Rob. And I don't have the exact comparable, because I'm not sure exactly what Neil did with Spin. It's been a long time since I read that book. I don't like the averaging kind of thing, right? When we sort of look at, hey, what are all of the best traits? Going back to this superpowers and sort of this individual thing, when you take all of those in aggregate, I think you get sort of a muddled answer. You get this average. And so again, as I think about the range of people that I've interviewed, some are way off the charts on the extroverted scale. Many are live in a more introverted space, and they tend to be a little bit more strategic in their approach, and it's less about some other things. That's just one dynamic. And if you average those two things together, you get something that's not special. So this is why I like telling the stories, and I like getting to the individual insights, because the averaging just creates sort of a mess. And the way I encourage people to learn, and one of the questions I ask is, do you have an underlying kind of core sales philosophy or methodology that you follow? And the most common answer to that is, well, it's mostly my own. It's been influenced by Spin and Challenger and Sandler and some of these other things. But the way that this really happens over time is you read one of these books, you listen to one of these podcasts, you watch this webinar, and you think, oh, that's an interesting idea. And I think that should be your goal with take one idea away that you can try. Like, how do you actually make it actionable, and see does that thing work for me? And can I then build that into my arsenal? And does it ultimately work? That, I think, is the real magic. Again, I did another recent sales tip I'm super proud of, called "Don't Lock Superman in the Phone Booth." Because I think too often managers are trying to manage by the numbers and put everybody in the same size box. Great leaders are helping people develop this superpower set of skills and recognizing that what Scott does is not replicable. It's not scalable. It's not repeatable. But I want Scott to be able to fly around the room, and I want Aquaman to, Aquaman doesn't fly. So trying to get Aquaman to fly, I'm on some sort of superhero theme here, but that just doesn't work. Why the heck would you try and make Aquaman fly and Superman do amazing stuff underwater? Like, that's stupid. Like, let's play to these strengths.
Yeah, and I think it goes back to how do you work that into your one-on-ones? You use the time for productivity, as you were saying earlier. Make those productive conversations that have a quality to them that advances things forward, makes you better understood, and helps you accelerate where you need to be. Pivoting back to sales questions about AI. So this has come up a little bit so far, but we're going to dive right into it. So what are your thoughts on AI and the new wave of impact on enterprise sales it might have, let's just say, over the next year? Let's start there.
Yeah, lots of thoughts on this topic. I think ultimately there's a little bit of a dichotomy here. Because when I started the podcast and I started these interviews, I thought I would find people I'm a tech guy. I thought I would find people who had figured out like this magical set of technology to allow them to do freaking crazy, amazing things. And the reality is, in 180 some odd interviews, I've found 2 or 3. It's rare. You want to know what the most common tech stack I hear about from these folks is? Scott, I use LinkedIn, I use my email, I use my calendar, and I write a lot of things down. Like, stupid simple. And I think a lot of that has to do with maintaining focus, right? The more that you're messing around with all of this stuff, the more there is potential for there to be distraction. Now, that said, there's a lot of usefulness. I use a lot of this stuff. If you're not using ChatGPT and Perplexity and sort of these things in your process, I think you're missing out on some opportunity to be able to accelerate your research and your learning and all of these kinds of things. And what I really encourage people the way I think you need to think about AI is it's human plus AI. The AI really needs to be an augmentation, and ideally it's augmenting your human. Right? It's making you better. It's enhancing those superpowers that we talked about. So what are the things that you do really well? Can you use some tools to make you even better at that, or allow you to do that thing 3 times more often? I think those are the ways that we're sort of able to make the most use of these tools. And from there, it's really first understanding what is that? Like, what is your personal use case? How are you trying to use this? What do you think you can do better? And then from there, lots of adaptability. Like, the world is going to continue to change faster and faster and faster. If you don't feel like the world is changing faster, I've felt like that way for 20 years. It's not going to stop. It's going to continue to accelerate. So you have to adapt and you have to experiment. You just have, try something, right? Try that idea that you found, try that AI tool that you heard about. Maybe it works great, maybe it doesn't, but that's the way it goes.
Yeah, and I think, we've had several roundtables over this past year. I mean, I can't even process where everybody's AI opinion was a year ago. Like, I remember a year ago, I talked to people on these roundtables, and they'd be like, "Yeah, I'm kind of dabbling in. My boss wants me to experiment, And now it's becoming so critical. But as you said, and other hosts of these roundtables, like I can think of John Barrows, Kyle Coleman, right? These folks who are day to day quota carrying, they're talking about never lose the humanity. It's the number one thing you can't lose. You have to fuse it together. You have to accelerate your processes, but you have to remain authentic. An A player is not copying and pasting. They are utilizing trusted insights and making sure they are accurate and they are making sure that everything that they're gathering is true to the customer and not shortcutting, because that will never, as you've said, get you in the long run.
Yep.
This next question, a lot of companies give out a sometimes small, modest budget. This person said, my company gives me a small budget for sales, books, courses, etc. Any recommendations?
Yeah. Obviously, it depends on how much that budget is, right? If it's a few $100s, that's one thing. If it's a couple $1,000s, that's maybe a different thing. Two things I think you should think about for yourself is, how do you learn best, right? Do you like books? Do you like audiobooks? Do you like podcasts? Do you like doing webinars? Do you like going to events? What are the things that work best for you? I think also really understanding, where do you need help? What do you need to work on? I actually see David Weiss in the chat. David leads the Sales Collective, and one of the coolest things that they are doing, they have a sales DNA test that they do on the front end of their process, where it'll tell you, this is where you're great. These are some areas that you can work on, and having that kind of a roadmap is so powerful to understand. Oh, okay, yeah, that makes sense. That is something I should work on now. Are there specific books? Are there specific learnings, right? Sales Collective has kind of a learning management system where you can grab the appropriate modules to do that. I also encourage you to think really holistically too, right? I think we get so dialed into the sales tactics and the nitty gritty sales methodologies. I think you need to have a balance. Yes, and think bigger about, could you perform better if you were healthier? Could you perform better if some other things in your life weren't broken and sideways? So I mean, again, so many resources. I mean, if you like the audio stuff, obviously you've got tons of free stuff on podcasts. I love Audible. Blinkist is a great tool, right? As even like a discovery place where you get real short book recaps, audio and on paper. And then again, if there's more, I would say find your people, right? What are those things that you want to work on, and how do you surround yourself with people who are excelling at the things that you want to be great on? So obviously, selfishly, that's what we're doing at the summit. That's what we're doing in the Sales Success Society. But again, I am there's tons of great stuff, and find what connects and resonates with you, right? If there's somebody who you've found on LinkedIn that consistently shares really high valuable stuff that you connect with, and philosophically you're like, yeah, that's the stuff. Cool, go buy their stuff, right? Lean into those things. Find the things that connect with you and who you are, right? Don't go try and find the thing that, yeah, this is going to try and make me be something I'm not. That thing's not going to work. Don't do that.
Yeah, and I think one of the greatest things, if not the greatest thing about the hope of the internet, the promise of the internet, is that we can connect more. I know that a lot of folks on these roundtables who have hosted, they're one of their number one advice pieces for productivity, for goals of the week. Send 20 outreach LinkedIn messages just to connect, just to say hi, not overwhelm anybody, but make that a part of your quota to connect. Because again, think of the conferences, think of the summits. You never know who you're going to run into, and building that relationship, seeing who's saying what of value to you, can sometimes be stronger than any book, because it's organic and people tend to just be really cool these days, hopefully. Yep. Where they will reply back and build up that rapport, maybe get on a call. So I think you're also saying, just don't be shy, build those A players around you organically. I'm going to throw in Steve's question here. Scott, tell us about your favorite sale you landed, plus one you missed, and a lesson you've learned.
Oh, story time. One of my all-time favorite deals, way back when I was at Bizarre Voice, I brought in a deal. This was at a time in the company where our average deal was 120K ARR. It was 10K a month. And I was working with a very large, so Bizarre Voice is a ratings and reviews platform. I was working with a large digital camera manufacturer, right? If you name the 2 or 3 brands that you're thinking of, yes, one of those. And I knew the value to what they had was just so high. So one part of this story is mindset and belief. The other part of this story is recognizing your value and what you have to bring to bear. So the way we ordinarily would have done that deal is cool, it's 120K and you get, all the different solutions that we have. And there are kind of three core pillars to that. In their case, I knew that one, that opportunity would likely overwhelm them. And the value was just insane. So I positioned one piece, 1/3 of what we offer at 3 times the price. And the way that this deal played out over time was I basically set them on a trajectory to become a $1 million ARR client. And that came to fruition. It was no longer my account after the first deal, which was a little bit frustrating. I actually recruited the guy who finished the process. But it was such a high value, high impact thing. I'm 90% sure that now 10 or 12 years later, they're still a client. So that deal has probably generated $10 million in revenue over time. In the moment, what was so crazy is I will never forget this. So I talked about Peloton. I love my Peloton. At the time, I used to teach indoor spin. So I was at the YMCA, sweating my brains out, showered. I jump in the car to drive into the office. It's about a 30-minute drive. While I'm driving in, I talk to kind of the leader of this deal within this organization, and he's like, "Look, Scott, and we're probably 2 days, 3 days from the end of the quarter." It's like, Scott, I can't do it. I can't make the timing happen in time. We've got to figure out like the legal process, and we haven't even gotten a set of red lines, and my team's super busy. He's like, I just don't think there's a way. Like, I want to be able to make this work, but I don't think we can kind of make your timing work. And so you all know that feeling, right? This was going to make my quarters, this was going to make my year. I was very new to the organization. My stomach sinks and I just feel freaking awful. I go into the office and it's just one of those, okay, what am I going to do? And I kind of found this inspiration. We had this strong culture in this organization. We were constantly playing Journey's Don't Stop Believing. It was like a whole theme for this team. It was like full blown startup days, like the level of excitement and everything else. And we did such a good job of connecting that and bringing that to our clients and helping them feel that energy. And so I just leaned into that. I wrote like this inspired email and was like, look, man, I totally understand. Absolutely get it. Just know I will do anything and everything to pull this together. We can get our general counsel on the phone. We can negotiate red lines in real time. We can do all the things. And then I just told like this don't stop believing story. I'm like, we're all about this, DSB kind of thing. And it took 15 minutes and he replied back with 3 letters. He just wrote DSB. And we work together. And so part of that story, and this is another thing that I love doing, is how do we work with our clients? How do we sit on the same side of the table and make something happen? And we were able to do that. We did that deal. I mean, I made club on that one deal. I was at the company 1 quarter. I broke the rules. I qualified for club because I sold so much in this single quarter. Like, oh, well, gosh, I guess our rules say you have to go. So I went. The flip side, I did a deal. This is awful. This is like D player behavior. I was working when I was at Eloqua. I had working a lot of deals in kind of the oil and gas space, like you do working in Houston. And so very large oil and gas company brand you would know, very competitive deal. We go in to do this demo and everything on the planet went wrong. We could not get an internet connection. It's very difficult to demo a SaaS product without an internet connection. It was a mess. It was an absolute mess. And I'm pretty sure I was behind my numbers, right? So I'm feeling the pressure. I'm making the wrong moves. And I threw my SE under the bus. Almost got him fired. again, it was one of those, in hindsight, and just one of those learnings of, Scott, this is not the way you can play the game. It was my fault, right? Like at the end of the day, I was the quarterback of that deal. And it's unacceptable for me to have put any blame on anybody else. So yeah, I lost the deal, almost lost a good SE. Fortunately, we were able to repair that organization, and I went back and kind of fixed it after the fact. But that's when I look back on and go, who was that guy? What an ass!
You lost that A player mentality for a minute there.
Yeah, don't do it. Don't do it. It's no good.
Well, Scott, we're rounding on toward the final question here. I mean, time. I thought we were at like the half hour mark. So I'm going to end on this question. I know this is one that you're really passionate about. So in our final minutes here, what are some of the most innovative sales strategies you've encountered through your interviews with top performers?
Yeah, there's been some good ones, right? I mean, a lot of it is so much as just reinforcing the things right? You probably don't need to go seek out new ideas. The things that you could and should do to be great. It's just a matter of doing that work and holding yourself accountable to doing that. That said, every now and then some really interesting, wild things come along. The first time I interviewed Brandon Fluharty, he was in the #1 spot at Live Person, still selling. And he talked to me about this executive memo process. So they'd had a leader that had come over from Amazon, and Amazon has this sort of model that came from Jeff Bezos, where they write, I think they actually do it in press release form. So before you go into a meeting and sort of pitch your big idea, you have to put together the press release of what the announcement is at the end of the process. And they just live on these types of memos and ideas. And so he did that for, I believe it was Delta Airlines. So he was a frequent Delta flyer, had some challenges, saw the disconnect and the opportunity that Live Person could bridge between the experiences that he and many others had and the gap in the organization, and was able to really quantify the value of bridging that. And he wrote this like 2-page memo. Here's all the details, like here's basically the pitch, and then shared it very widely in the organization, right? Shared it with a lot of executives and a lot of just key people, got their attention, got involved in the deal. I took that. This is something that I've incorporated personally. I've taken that idea, and Lisa Palmer, when she was selling for Teradata back in the day, had a very similar sort of a approach in the way that she would collaboratively whiteboard with clients. So I took that as a working story. So oftentimes we're building a business case. We're building, here's the numbers behind the deal, but selling's emotional. What's the emotion behind the deal? And so being able to co-write. So what I took that and did with that was, I'll create the first draft, but then work with my champions to get, how do I get the language of that organization? How do I get like the tie-ins for the highest value priorities that their executives have and those types of things? And how do we then tell this story together and it's a working document. It's something that evolves. So freaking powerful, right? Nobody does this. So it's finding things like that are just absolutely amazing. So Brandon Fluharty, the executive memo was one, just changed my life. Matt DuPont is one of these sellers who he is some kind of a unicorn. He has the most detailed time tracking process on the planet, to where he can measure his metric is commission per hour. So he can basically look at how much time did I spend on this deal and what was the end result for me from a commission perspective, so that he could understand where does it make sense for me to spend my time. And what was fascinating about it is most of the organization was like, oh, it's this kind of big deal. He's like, yeah, actually the ones that are half that size but move 4 times faster, way better use of time. They're easier, they're quicker. Like every part of it is easier. So, it's finding those whether it's a productivity tool or a process or just looking at the data, right? You can't really understand something until you really start to measure it and understand, am I doing a good job of this or not? And you need to sort of quantify it. So Matt is amazing from that perspective. More recently, just a handful of episodes ago, earlier this summer, I had a conversation with Samantha Price, and Sam talked about micro moments. And the way she was thinking about this was, how do I improve every little experience that my client has with me? And she was thinking about things like, well, we start every freaking conversation on Zoom with introductions. How do I do introductions in a way that is way more impactful and meaningful and memorable, and take these things that are like a mundane part of just the normal stupid way that we do things and make it amazing and make it great? And recognizing that the difference between winning and losing is so minute. It's these little things. And so if you really lean into what are those little things, how could I improve just each little piece of these experience, those micro moments add up to a big win. So again, something that has absolutely inspired me that I'm thinking about all the time now in terms of, gosh, how do we make that better? How do we improve that little thing? I mean, Matt, you saw, how do I prepare just a little bit better, right? So that the meetings and the delivery that we have is that much more relevant and that much more on point.
Well, I think, you've alluded to a lot of different things throughout this conversation. I love the end, especially because these little things, the micro moments, as you called them, Scott, they make the biggest difference. They make the seller stand out. And a lot of the times they come from an authentic place, I imagine, something that resonated with you. So you've adopted it, or now you've listened to these one percenters, and there's little things that you're bringing into that. And I think that goes back to your original point. An A player, once they hit that point, that's great. They have to continue to surround themselves. They have to continue to evolve. And it's not on that lonely mountain will they do that. They have to continue to strive to make connections, to collaborate, to do some of the things we talked about, perhaps outreach, follow the right people, and make those in-person connections, like you said, at your summit, because those are the relationships. They last a lifetime in many cases, and they're not just a revenue generator. They make your life enriched. They bring you that work-life balance, because not every conversation has to be about the deal, right?
That's it. And just while Sam is actually here. I didn't know she was here. So that was exciting to do a shout out that was pre-planned, but amazing that she's here. Thanks for being here, Sam.
Well, Scott, we want to thank you. I mean, I can't believe it. This is one of the sessions that, boom, we covered so much. We didn't even get to all our questions. Just to let everybody know, we will email a follow-up. We'll send out Scott's websites, because again, they were a really big learning curve or learning point for me to learn a lot about enterprise sales quickly, and to have the real thing right in front of me. What a gift. So thank you, Scott. Wish you a happy holidays. Any parting words for the audience here as we end?
You said something earlier that I loved, which is don't be shy about reaching out, right? People want to help. Drop me a note, right? If you made it this far, I'd love to hear from you.
Yeah. And I hope to keep in touch with you, Scott. Thanks again. And again, thanks to everybody who attended. We will follow up, and appreciate everybody's time. Have a great day, everybody.
Thanks, Matt. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.